Kingdom study tonight. God bless you.
Good evening to you. Thank you so much, First Lady. Good evening to you, every single member of the family. And for those who may be new tonight, if there's anyone, we welcome you to our family. We love our family. We call ourselves the LiveRight family, and it's under the LiveRight Ministries. And we are glad that you are here. Thank you so much, First Lady, for sharing with us once again and allowing God to use you to speak. So we are going to continue where we left off last evening, and we were looking, please, if you can go back to 1 Timothy chapter 3, verses 1 to 13. 1 Timothy chapter 3, First Lady, 1 to 13. And we were looking at, remember, we were talking about leadership, talking about leader, how to be a leader. We are saying don't wait until you're in a leadership position for so that you look to see if you have the qualifications. You have to qualify yourself before you get into a leadership position. Yes? And so we are looking at 1 Timothy chapter 3, verses 1 to 13, because we are looking at the fact that a leader is supposed to be respected or respectable. He must be reputable, or in other words, have a good reputation. That's what we're looking at right now. And so we started reading 1 Timothy chapter 3. And if you could just read it again from the beginning, and we get to where we went to, where we were last evening. 1 Timothy chapter 3, verses 1 through 13, the NLT.
Yes, Dr. Richards. This is a trustworthy saying. If someone aspires to be a church leader, he desires an honorable position. So a church leader must be a man whose life is above reproach. He must be faithful to his wife. He must exercise self-control, live wisely, and have a good reputation. He must enjoy having guests in his home, and he must be able to teach. He must not be a heavy drinker or be violent. He must be gentle, not quarrelsome, and not love money. He must manage his own family well, having children who respect and obey him. For if a man cannot manage his own household, how can he take care of God's church?
Stop there. Okay, so that's where we were last evening, right? He must be able to manage his own family well. If he cannot manage his own household, he can't take care of God's church. And we were asking the question, I was asking you, especially in this day and age, where there's this saying, there's this belief that a parent is responsible for their children. So whatever the children do, the parents have to be held responsible, have to be held accountable for it. And so much so that they want to make law that way. I don't think that has happened as yet, but that's talk out there in the public domain. So we are looking at that and relating it to what we're talking about, where elder, a leader, bishop or pastor, whomever is the leader. If you can't manage your household, then that disqualifies you. Elder Sheldon shared some things last evening. And so I'm asking, as we continue the discussion, I'm asking the question, are parents responsible for their children, for the things that their children do? Do we hold parents accountable for the things that their children do? This verse seems to be saying that. What say you? Would you subscribe to something like that, where the parent, male and female, father and mother, or even if it's a single parent, whomever it is, the father or the mother, to be held responsible for what their children do? And should that disqualify them? If you are a pastor, you want to be a pastor or a deacon, because remember, deacons are also included in this, right? you want to be a pastor, deacon, a bishop, or whomever, does it disqualify you if your children rebellious or be rebellious? If your children giving trouble, your child or your children giving trouble, then does that disqualify? What do you think? Talk to me, somebody. Does it disqualify you if your children are rebellious? I know Elder Sheldon gave his opinion on that, but I want us to start here tonight, especially because it's out there in the public domain with regards to parent, children, and the law is concerned. What say you? What say you? Talk to me, somebody. This is a forum that we talk. We talk. Well, in recent time, you all haven't been talking much, and I want us to get back to that place where we talk, we discuss. There's no right or wrong. There's not. I'm not looking for a particular answer to see who would get. It's not a quiz. It's not a test. It's not any of that. It's not an exam. But I just want to hear what you think. Does that disqualify if my son, my child, if Joshua, Jonathan, or Judah gets themselves into trouble, would that disqualify me and First Lady from leading this ministry? Yeah, so let's hear you.
We have Sister Mitzi's hand is up and Sister Susan in that order.
Go ahead, Sister Mitzi.
Good evening, everyone. Pastor Noel, Pastor Nicole. It's a two-coin thing for me, because you will train up, just use Joshua, you will train up Joshua, right? The right way, because the word of God said you must train up a child in the way that they should go, so that when they get old, whatever you instill in them, it will not depart from them, which is the word of God, right? So you will do right by Joshua, do everything in your human power to make sure Joshua is on the right track, right? Joshua saw your lifestyle and it is clean. I mean, you're not perfect, I'm just saying, right? So Joshua know what is what. But then again, on the other side, Joshua goodly go out there, and bunks up some friends, and whatever it is that you instill in him, it is there, but he just push it aside for the moment, just for the thrill of whatever it is his peers are doing, and get himself in trouble. But with that, when you look at it, you and First Lady are not responsible for the actions of Joshua. And then again, it have to depend on Joshua's age, because if Joshua is of age, Joshua is accountable for his action. Now, if Joshua is 9, right? If Joshua is 9, it all depends on the situation that he finds himself into. Now, what 9-year-old will find themselves in such a trouble that the parents would be held responsible? We have to look at it that way. But at the same time, if he's at age, he's responsible for his own actions, not the parents. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Thank you for your 2 cents. Anyone else?
Hi. Good night.
Hi.
This is Susan here.
Hi.
My sister just now more or less said it all, but I just want to add something to it, right? Because I was going to say, no, the parents shouldn't be whole responsible. Because yes, again, when they reach a certain age, yes, you train them up. They go to church, they go Sunday school, they know the word. And when they reach a certain age, sometimes they choose to go their way, that they make that choice, right? To go their own way. But with our prayer as a parent, we keep praying for them that they will eventually remember where they came from. They would know turn back to God. So we know what we tell them, we know what we teach them, and when that happens and they step away from it, we keep praying for them, and eventually they would come back to remember what they learned in Sunday school and what we or the parents taught them. So Yeah, so sometimes yeah, we don't have to be, whole responsible, because when they reach a certain age, as my sister says, sometimes they make their own choice, right? And there's nothing that we can do when they at age and we take them to church with us and we take them to Sunday school, right? They on the track that we want them to go, but then when they leave our home, as the case may be, they make their own choice. So we as parents have to pray for them, don't stop praying for them, and eventually they would remember where they came from. So that's my 25 cents.
Thank you for your 25 cents. Thank you. Who is the next
Okay.
person?
Before Elder Sherry, we have some comments in the chat. One says, how can you correct someone else's child if you can't correct your child? Another says, I don't think so, Dr. Richards. Another says, I think it depends on the age of the children. Another says, I would say no, because you brought them up in the right way. They choose to go the other way. Another says, I would say no, that will not disqualify you. Elder Sherry?
Good evening, everyone. So I was basically listening. Going to say similar to what Sister Mitzi was saying, and then Sister Susan added that it's not as cut and dry as disqualifying because the child has gone astray or right to what the teachings. First, you have to do some examination of the parents. Whether you're in leadership or not, because there are many parents in leadership, and I think Elder Sheldon alluded to that as well, that you cannot correct their children. They if you come to them and even notify them of things that you observe that their children are doing, they can be very offended by that. And in a case like that, I think that disqualifies you. If you as a parent and a parent in leadership, in ministry, or even having desire to be in ministry, and someone can't tell you about things that they observe in your children, because the old saying is that it takes a village. So obviously you wouldn't be able to be everywhere. You can't see everything. And so it is good that other people have eyes out there for you as well, looking on, because they regard you as a leader for your children. If that offends you, if that upsets you, then I think you're not suited for a position of leadership, because it means that you will overlook wrong. Even in your leadership position, you can overlook wrongdoing. You might be compromised. So that is something that you'll have to look at. But generally, as Sister Susan and Sister Mitzi was saying, if you have done as the word, because that's our guide, the Bible says train them up in the way they should go. It says foolishness is bound in the heart of a child, and the rod of correction will drive them out. And that rod doesn't necessarily always mean physical rod, but discipline. And so if we apply those things, then you cannot be held accountable. And it's not only if the child leave your house. What about the children in your house that are doing their own thing or going against the rules of the house? Once you are putting your foot down and you are establishing that there are rules, and as I say to my son, just as the country has rules, the school has rules, the house has rules, and you have to abide. And as long as you're in this house, you have to follow the rules of this house, and it doesn't change. And if you're a man and you're in this house, the rules still wouldn't change. You understand? Because we have a standard by which we set for how we operate here. So if you're an adult and you can't abide by the rules, well then, the door is there and you can access your own place where you could do what you want. Yeah, so it's you have to weigh the pros and cons. You have to weigh the circumstances and the situation, and only then can you really make a decision whether it qualifies or disqualifies you.
Thank you, Elder Sherry. Is there anyone else?
Before Minister Jiva, we have some more comments in the chat. One says, I will say if a parent does all that they can for the kids and guides them on the right path, and they choose to do what's not right, it's not the parent's fault. Another says, some children are well behaved in front of your face, but when they go out, they are totally different to fit in with the crowd. That does not disqualify you as a leader. Minister
Thank
Jiva?
you, Minister Jiva.
Hi, good night, everyone. I agree with everything that everyone said before, but there are some leaders as well. They put on a show in public, and behind closed doors with their children and their family, they are different people. There are some Christian children's pastors' kids, as they call them. When you speak to them and they ask them, your parents, how they're so nice and why you living such a life, they say, you don't know the people that I know. So they are just living life because they realize that they are not sincere, they're not real, their heart posture is not in the same place. They know to put it on the platform in public, in other words. But behind closed doors, they are not the same people. So those people, according to Elder Sherry, you have to do some introspection and see what is going on behind the scenes in order to know if those leaders are disqualified because of how their children are behaving.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Jeevich. Anyone else?
No, Dr. Richards.
And I hear all the comments, and they're all well received. My own personal view, when I look at this passage, one of the things that I look at is the fact that when we are interpreting scripture, there are certain things that we look for. One has to do with the culture. And we did this already in hermeneutics, and we'll do it again, how to properly interpret scripture. And one of the things, the four things that we look at is what was the culture of the time and why would it have been said? Because this would have been said, we have two audiences, as I told you, the biblical audience, that's who the information was written to, the book was written to, and then you have the present day audience, that's us. And we have to look at the difference in culture and how things are. Now, at that time, families were close-knit. The father was the patriarch of the family. Whatever the father says goes in those days. So much so that part of the law, well, prior to that, the law was that if your son was rebellious, you stoned him because you couldn't rebel against your parents at all. And they was so serious. And so their culture was one of close-knit family. That's why I think that hospitality was important. So those parents who were unable to rule their children because they were expected to, the father especially was expected to be able to have a tight grip, a firm grip on his family. He was supposed to be able to rule them. And if his children were rebellious and he could not rule them, then how could he, as Paul says, rule the church? How could he, if he cannot take care of his own household, if he can't manage his own household, how could he take care of God's church? In our culture, it's a little bit different. We're living in the 21st century, where even young children, they're joining gangs, they're getting influenced by their peers and schools and all of that, and the parents doesn't have that much control as it was in the past over their children. Children do things now that, one of the things that I have said to the church that I used to go to, and I'm saying it to you all now if I haven't said it before. My children are your children. Firstly, then I can't raise our children by ourselves. We can't be everywhere. We are not God. We are not, omniscient and omnipresent and all these things. So we expect that you would assist us in raising our children. And there are some people, I think it was said tonight, you can't talk to the children. You're offended if anybody talk to your children. You don't allow people to pour into your children or correct your children. And that's why a lot of children are going astray. That's why the village is no longer raising the child, because when the village tries to raise the child, you want to go down in school to beat the teacher and you want to cuss this person because they say something to your children. That ought not to be so. And our children, I think I said it to you before, if you see my child, one of our sons, somewhere where they're not supposed to be, you have the right to question them. If you see one of our sons doing something they're not supposed to do, I expect you to intervene. We cannot do it ourselves. And don't say, well, that's the pastor, son, or so we can't do it. No, it is your responsibility as well. So if it is that not being able to control the children disqualified you, then all of us get disqualified because you are all responsible for our children as well. I don't expect my son to be, walk into some place and steal something and you notice that and you didn't do anything. You are, the only thing I tell people don't do is hit my children, don't hit them. But anything else, and if you feel that you are not able to deal with the situation, pick up the phone and call me, call First Lady. But it's your responsibility as well. And I'm saying this to you tonight. And my children know that. And they will never come home and complain and say, Sheldon's talk to me down the road and talk to me kind of rough. Because I will ask her, well, what were you doing for him to talk to you so? Because he has our permission to assist in shaping you and disciplining you, and so everyone else. So I'm just saying that in this day and age, it is difficult to hold a parent responsible for their children when there are so many things that are pulling your children, even the internet, the technology, everything else. It is so difficult and unfair, as far as I'm concerned, to hold parents responsible for children, especially when they are of age. If they're toddlers and young people in your house, fine. And if you have done, as some people have said, you have done, you are training up your child in the way they should go, and they decide to go outside of that, why should you be held responsible for that? That's my opinion on this. And, I just feel that we need to understand, if we could come back to that place of the village raising the child, if we could only come back to that, life would be much easier, much better in this day and age. Yes?
Dr. Richards, we have Elder Sheldon's hand is up. And
Elder Sheldon. Go ahead.
Good night, everyone. Dr. Richards, I'm listening to you, and I'm asking myself some questions, in the sense that I want to allude to what Elder Sherry said. And let me just ask a question. Are we dealing with because last night you asked a question about the secular world. Are we dealing with children in the house of God, or are we dealing with children in the secular world? Right?
Well, because I asked the secular question last night, and I just brought that in because of the fact that it's out there in the public space where that's what they want to do. This here really is speaking to this scripture is really speaking to children within Christianity. Their parents, they are desiring to be leaders in the church. All right, so that's basically what we're talking about here.
Because what it is, and I think Elder Sherry touched on it, right? Because where I would have the problem with this is, you see the parents' unwillingness to act. If the information was brought to your attention, and I have to come back to the incident with Eli, right? Because that was the reason why Eli was judged, because the information was brought to him, and he did not act. And if it is we are dealing with children in the house of God, what went on in the old days, how I am looking at it, yes, I hear what you're saying, that it's two different times, but what it is I am saying, how I am looking at it, if we are in dealing with God's house, what stood for God's house then should stand for God's house now, right? This is just my opinion, right? And if it is, this was the standard then this should be the standard now. And if it is, the information was brought to you as the leader about your children going awry, and you as the parent refusing to act, then you are totally disqualified.
Absolutely.
You are totally disqualified, right? But what it is you find we have happening now, right, is that, as Ella Sherry rightly said, right, even if the information is brought to your attention, you do absolutely nothing about it. But at the same time, you want to come into the house and correct other people's children, right? Right? As you know, they say a speck and beam, right? Watch out what's going on with you first before you can come and fix me. I am not saying that, you cannot fix me, but how could you come and fix me when your business basically in a mess, right? And this is what it is I am looking at, in the sense that we as children in the house of God, right? And yes, I do understand that, yes, there are a lot of distractions, there are a lot of things that pulling our children now that today that there wasn't in the olden days. But I firmly believe that the rule of God still stands from then, it still stands now, especially where God's house is concerned, and the ones who are placed over, right? The shepherds who are placed over God's house, because it's a great responsibility, right? And you have to take that very, very serious, because when he said that, woe unto the shepherd that lead the flock astray, right? You have to understand as a shepherd, right? And not and this is where you find a lot of the times that people, the leaders and them, they get misguided and misled and things, because when they start to refer to the sheep as my sheep, it's not your sheep, right? It's not your sheep. You are just a steward, right? It's not your church. It's the church of God, right? And this is where, I feel that, we have strayed, we have been, been misled, right? And allowed ourselves to become, distracted for what is going on right now, right? But I firmly believe that where the standards of all is concerned, right, that should still stand. That if the information, I don't care whether the child is 9 or the child is 25, once that information is brought to you and you refuse to act on it, you are disqualified. You are disqualified. And because you would know, right, whether the children living in your house with you or they're not living in your house with you, right, you are disqualified. And that's my 75 cents.
Money going up, boy. Thank you. And I hear you, Michelle, and I agree with you. And hence the reason why I say, as a parent and as a pastor, you take action. You are the first, you have what they call first responders. First responders, you. Nobody is coming to tell me that my child did something down the road and I vex. And I vex because you intervene. And I vex because and that's why I agree with you. If nothing is done, if the information is brought to you, nothing is done, you are disqualified because you're responsible. You are responsible for your children to raise them. But as I say, in this day and age, we need the assistance of everybody because of all that is going on out there. So I expect everybody here, even if I gave the example again, you see my child somewhere or my son, our son somewhere, they're not supposed to be, pick up the phone and call me. I'm not going to blow you out for that. I want to know why he is where he is, all right, because it is my responsibility to manage my home. But what I'm saying as a parent in 2025, I need your assistance to manage what is happening, not within my home, but in my family, because we are family. And so if it is that information is brought to you and you refuse to act on it, and you allow your children to go astray, yeah, you are disqualified straight away. All right? As you said, the standard must be kept. But the difference is that in those day and age, there was not that challenge because parents were respected. They were respected. And if they did something that they were unable to control the situation at home, then it meant that they were not, it's like applying for a job, they weren't qualified to be a leader in the church. Because the society itself, the culture itself lended itself to you being a good parent. The society lended itself to you managing your own household. So if you didn't manage it properly, then yes, you are disqualified. Here in this day and age, it seems to be the opposite, because the society doesn't help you raise a child. The village no longer raising the child. So it's a little more, it's more challenging. And that is why I say it should be a collective responsibility to help raise children. I want people to mentor my boys. I want people to see them and say, hey, Judah, you shouldn't be doing that, boy. Your father, that's not the way your father raised you. That's what I want. And this is what I ask for all leaders. Allow people to assist you to raise your children. Don't be the parent that says, you can't talk to my child. You can't tell them nothing. If you see them, you leave them. That kind of parent is not a good parent and cannot correct any other children within in the house of God or speak to any other parent in the house of God. Amen? Anybody else? And feel free to disagree, folks. Feel free to disagree. So we good to go? How much more time we have? 10 minutes? All right. So First Lady.
A church leader must not be a new believer because he might become proud and the devil will cause him to fall.
Stop. I mean, this is so, I don't know, straightforward as far as I'm concerned. You can't take a man and put him in a leadership position because he just got saved and maybe he's well off, he has money, he has a good position. Maybe in the secular world, he might be a manager, a CEO, or some kind of thing. But once you are a new believer, you cannot become a leader outside of the church and a leader within the church are two different people. Because as a leader outside, you need to know the principles by which you work, under which you work, the rules, the guidelines, the laws, the bylaws, everything. When you come into Christianity, then you also need to know as well, and that is found in the scriptures. And if you are a leader, you have to be guiding people. As a leader, you ought to, I told you, sometimes you share these things so many times, you don't know if you share it here and there or wherever. But I remember being in a church once, and this guy, you all know the person, so I'm not going to call his name, came to the church that I was going to preach. But that was a long time ago. He had just gotten saved, but he was well known. And I don't know how in the world he was invited to preach. And all he did was stand up and quote verses. And they weren't even connected. He sat up there and he was quoting this and quoting that, and he was talking, and I was confused. Not because you're well known, you're famous, it means that you ought to be made a leader. I mean that in that case you were just a preacher. But that is also a leadership position because you're guiding people, you're leading people, and you don't do that. So he must not be a new believer. Paul said because he might become proud and the devil would cause him to fall. And I would want to say in this day and age, because he would not, listen, one of the things that a lot of people do, well, some people do, let me not say is that they have to go and minister, they go on the internet, they pull off the information, maybe a sermon from somewhere, and they come and they start to preach. They don't know what they say, they don't understand, but somebody prepared the sermon and they feel it's okay for them to do it. It's okay for them to regurgitate the information because you don't know yourself. You didn't spend time with God. You're a new believer. You don't understand the things of the kingdom. You don't understand the principles, but you want to go and preach. And in some cases, they put you in a leadership position and you want to lead, and you want to lead the same way you lead in the secular world, and it doesn't work like that. So a church leader must not be a new believer.
We have Elder Sherry's hand is up, Dr. Richards.
Elder Sherry.
Forgive me, me on this phone. I was, as you were saying that, Dr. Richards, recently, I don't know if it was all over the internet, where Denzel Washington was recently baptized and ordained a minister, practically all in one. So as you were saying that, my mind went back to that, and I guess that's why this lay hand on no man suddenly, you know.
Correct. Somebody just sent and tell me that as well. You don't do that. Being a leader has nothing to do with popularity. It has to do with calling. It has to do with training. It has to do with all that we are saying right now. These are the qualifications to make you a leader. Not being a newbie, not coming in because you're well known. No. All right, and Paul said it. So how much more time we have? Okay, we're gonna have to end here because I see we only have a few more minutes. But folks, I want to remind us that these qualifications, now again, Paul was talking to Timothy, and he was talking to Timothy within a certain context in terms of the culture at the time, what was happening at the time, and everything else. But these principles, if we can take them and cross over into 2025, it may not be the same, but the principle remains the same. How we do it and the facts surrounding certain things may not be the same. For example, Paul wouldn't say, well, he shouldn't be a CEO who just got saved. Paul wouldn't say it like that. But the principle is he must not be somebody who is not able to understand the things of God and articulate them. That's the principle. So he can't be a new believer. And so we, again, will continue this to this Thursday. So we continue next week, Tuesday, God's willing. And I want us to remember these qualifications. Do not tell yourself, allow the devil to tell you, hey, you're not a leader, so it is not for you. That is for every single person. Get the qualification.